We as a human species have had an extremely perplexing relationship with children. We have story after story of this very confusion playing out throughout our history. Now, I am a behavioral scientist and social psychologist. I get the amazing opportunity to use behavioral science to build out new and novel frameworks with universities and schools and educational organizations so that we can embrace the voice of the child. But let's be honest, we don't have a history that has embraced the voice of the child. In fact, we have a history that has silenced that very voice. Imagine with me, if you will, that you are around 8 or 9 years old and you're standing face to face with your father. And without explanation, he begins to reach over and grabs a few twigs from a nearby tree, and he ties them together and he uses them to bind your wrist. And the confusion begins to settle in. And then he reaches over and brings in a tattered piece of cloth as if he had saved it for this moment. And he grabs it and wraps it around your eyes, just tight enough that it blocks out any light from the outside world. And more confusion settles in. And he grabs you by your bound wrists, and he begins walking you slowly up the vaulted side of a mountain. And as confusion turns to memory, you're reminded of a conversation that you had with him about a year ago. And he spoke of the need of a sacrifice. He spoke of the need of someone to give up their life for the sake of the tribe, and how this sacrifice would be remembered for centuries to come. About 100,000 years ago, the voice of a child was silenced. However, that's not where the story ends. Venture with me to medieval England, and I want you to imagine that now you are a 13 or 14-year-old boy or girl, and your body is going through lots of changes, and your voice is beginning to crack, and the question about who you are in the world is beginning to deepen and inspire you. However, depending on what region you grew up in would predetermine your destiny. If you were a male, you would end up going into the priesthood. If you were a female, you would end up becoming a nun. If neither of those were options, then you would work anywhere from 12 to 16 hours a day in whatever trade your parents chose. In medieval England, the voice of the child had been silenced. Venture with me one more time. This time I want you to imagine that you are a churchgoer, a parishioner in 15th century Shropshire, England. And your pastor is John Merck, and you're beginning to doze off, as most do during any church service. And then he says something that doesn't sit quite right. In fact, what he says becomes a popularly coined phrase in Victorian England and will inform them how to educate children. And this phrase was, children should be seen and not heard. Children should be seen and not heard. In Victorian England, education became a way to silence the voice of the child. And unfortunately, that silencing in the form of education is still happening even across America. According to the National Education Association, over 70% of students cite that the very reason they are going through anxiety, depression, and social self-esteem issues is due to the way a school is structured. We have defined education as regurgitation. If a student can memorize a concept, then somehow they've learned it. That's not education. That's simply memorization. Then we also have a classroom where every student is subordinate and there is an authoritarian figure standing above them. We have invented a pedagogical factory of obedient citizens for the workforce, rather than creating safe spaces for students to use the skill of critical thinking to help us think in and beyond our current human potential. We need to begin embracing the child as an equal. We need to advocate for spaces where their voice is heard and empowered. For those of you who might be skeptical, I want you to hear about two examples of youth across the world who I think embody what it could look like if we turn this into a normative habit, where the normative habit is to advocate for equality, where the normative habit is to see that the voice of the child has just as much power as we do. Take, for example, the voice of Greta Thunberg, the Swedish teenage activist who is forcing us all to ask much deeper questions about our relationship with the environment. Or what about Malala Yousafzai, a victim of violence who is now advocating for educational access, no matter your gender or age? And there are many examples waiting to happen if we allow them to happen. And I think there are three things that we need to do and develop for us to advocate for spaces for the voice of the child to be heard and to be treated as a direct equal in our society. One, we need to change the way that we talk about children. We need to change the language, and we need to change the ideology that guides that language. And there is a dance between the two. You need to change the ideology as well as the language. They both inform one another. We cannot simply just change language. We have to change the ideological structure that guides the language. Two, and this one cannot be overstated, we need to train parents in new and novel ways to advocate for the voice of their own child, to reinvent family models that celebrate the voice of the child. Did you know that over 7.8 million children a year in America alone experience some form of abuse? 7.8 million times that the voice of the child has been silenced. And do you know what? 92% of those doing the silencing are either a parent or a so-called loved one. That is not acceptable. We need better parenting techniques, and we need them yesterday. And three, we need to artfully, creatively, and yet assertively demand that the voice of the child be heard in every sector of society, especially if we're going to build out new models of curriculum or new models where the voice of the child is embraced and celebrated and applauded. We need to see this as all of our responsibility. Now, all of us have grown up with a still small voice guiding us towards the better angels of our nature. And this still small voice embraces creativity, embraces curiosity, embraces innovation, forces the status quo to look beyond itself, doesn't believe in the word impossible. And do you know why we refer to it as a still small voice? Could it be that it's that very child that we have allowed to be silenced within each of us all? We need to begin asking deeper questions. We need to begin advocating for the voice of the child. We need to listen to that still small voice that believes this is all possible. But the question is, will you? Will you listen to that child inside of you?